So I am going to go around and give you a brief tour of ARIN's engineering team. So let's go on to the next slide, please. Before I begin, it's kind of funny. Both Mr. Sweeting and I are in the office today. I'm in the office today because there's construction going on in my neighborhood, and I didn't want to leave anything to chance. And here we have just a bit of a hiccup at our network at the office, but I think everything's okay now. So anyways, let's go on with our agenda. We have a bit of development history that I want to talk about. Prioritization, how does engineering actually figure out what's going to go on? What we have done since ARIN 46 and what we plan on doing, or actually 47, and what do we plan on doing for the remainder of 2021? Next slide, please. Development history. Next slide, please. So I started in ARIN back in 2007. And at that point, we were a Perl shop, and we also used Waterfall. And it became fairly apparent that we needed to make some changes. So we did a number of different things. One is we went to Java. So most of our application development now is in Java. And we moved to an agile environment. And that's worked out really well for us. Our first sprint was completed in December of 2009. And we've completed 170 sprints since then. Sprint durations are now 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, with a 2-week release hardening sprint right before deployment. And one of the things that's interesting here is that we have, after each sprint, we actually have a sprint review and planning where we go through and say, this is what this team has done and what they've developed over this past sprint, and actually review it with interested parties within ARIN's within the company of ARIN. So it's well seen by those who are interested on what we're doing. Since that time, we've had 67 planned releases since 2008. And we've had many other minor releases during that time. Most of them you don't see because we have now gone to a development, actual operational environment where we can make changes without any interruption to the public. Most of our releases are no longer customer impacting as a result. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, let's talk about prioritization. Here are the factors that influence priorities. It's not, hey, this is what engineering wants to do and this is what we're going to do. There's a number of things that actually are influence our priorities. And these are all things that are approved and acknowledged by Mr. Kern and also Mr. Jimerson. And there's a number of things that are used as part of our plan as we go forward, what we plan on doing. And here are the factors that influence our priorities. Board of Trustee initiatives, legal and regulatory requirements, ratified policies that need development or implementation changes, ACSPs, operating plan objectives. Hey, we got to change out this piece of hardware because it's about ready to fail. Defects, maintenance, and upgrades, just something that we have to do. Almost every engineering team has to do this. Environmental changes. We are moving different offices. Customer feedback via the feedback button or otherwise. Customer surveys and mailing list requests. All these things actually play a role in setting up our plan for the current year and also for the upcoming years. So we typically do a 2-year plan. Next slide, please. So what have we completed since ARIN 46 into ARIN 47? Next slide, please. So our themes have been decrease our technical debt. You've heard me speak a number of times in the past about our technical debt, and we're doing a tremendous amount of work here and having a tremendous amount of success in reducing our technical debt. We plan on continue to iterate on the IRR that's going on and upgrading our backend services and monitoring. Next slide, please. Here's what we've done. And here are the things that are external that you've seen. We've rolled out a base level API for the IRR. So there's now a RESTful service for people to add and remove routes, et cetera, within using a RESTful API. We also put out an RDAP Bootstrap server that's released on GitHub, including a Docker image. So if you wanted to run an RDAP Bootstrap server, you can do so. We've increased our CRR limits on RPKI. That we used to have a very hard limit based on hardware limitations on our high security module. That's now been removed. And now we basically can deal with as many as rows as we currently have in our inventory. We fixed a delegated RPKI issue in OT&E, so customers wouldn't have to request RSD to make a change. This is actually now seamless. We've updated our RDAP Bootstrap endpoints in NIC-info and fixed some bugs as well. NIC-info is a client that's universally used by the community. RDAP community is probably one of the most prevalent uses and highest use of RDAP using the NIC-info client. We're not sending annual validation emails to reassignment POCs anymore per policy. We're doing an upgrade to CentOS 7 across the board. We were running CentOS 6. All our publicly available instances are running CentOS 7 or other variants of BSD. So we're fairly recent on our OSs across our public infrastructure. We've removed all our public NetApp appliances. One of these, as you may recall, actually gave us some troubles about a year and a half ago. So all our publicly available NetApps are now gone, and they've been replaced. We've removed SSL 1.1 support, and we will soon be adding SSL 1.3 support. We are adding CAPTCHA to the ARIN online process, and I talked about that yesterday. We anticasted a very busy DNS secondary box that's has a huge amount of traffic. It's now going across our 3 public-facing sites that we have, one in Dulles, one in Seattle, and one in San Jose. We've moved board and AC port support to a cloud-based solution, and we have a service status dashboard. Let's go on the next slide, please. Here is the service status dashboard. You can now see via the web, you can actually see the availability of our services. Outage notifications will be displayed here, and you can also subscribe to it so you can actually get notifications. You don't always have to pull the website to see what's going on. So, and there's a whole variety of ways to actually get this information. Next slide, please. What we've done internally that you haven't seen, or actually you may see in the near future, we have a DNSSEC appliance. It's called Secure 64, and we've recently upgraded it, and we are going to move to a more modern algorithm. We're currently on algorithm 5, which is being deprecated, and we will be moving to algorithm 8. So you will be seeing this in the upcoming months. We're going about this very carefully so that we don't have any issues. We've had lots of tech debt and inner software that we've replaced, dealing with the management application as well as our zone generator. We also are put in place reporting and analysis of third-party issues that we have within ARIN Online. We have a dependency checker that we check against, as well as a security review audit appliance called SonarQube. We have better security monitoring put in place, and we've been focusing on moving internal services into the cloud. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, what do we have in plan? Next slide, please. We plan on continuing to iterate on the IRR. There's more API endpoints coming out with IRR that you will soon see. Well, we have some work to do with Premier Services that was announced yesterday to make it easier for RSD. We plan on adding new features to RPKI. Things that we have, one that's fairly near is adding RRDP instances to the cloud. Repositories can be fetched by one of 2 ways. One is a web-based protocol called RRDP, which is pretty easy to put in the cloud, and the other one is via the rsync protocol, which is a little bit harder to put into the protocol. We also are putting planning on supporting a hosted repository service for delegated customers. There's been a number of people have been asking Brad Gorman for this, and something I'm sure we will be be working on. And also the synchronization of IRR and RPKI objects. We plan on doing improved login security following our NIST guidelines that we talked about yesterday. And regarding a question that RS asked yesterday in terms of what our password guidelines are in terms of lengths, the NIST guidelines are a minimum of 8 characters and a maximum, or the maximum being no less than 64 characters. Our current implementation has 12 as a minimum, which can be variable. And currently the maximum is set at 64. We are working on an integration of a third-party election system, integrating a new one, rolling out new and adder zones I mentioned before with a more modern algorithm, and updating our load balancers to the latest so that we can support SSL 1.3. Next slide, please. Internally, we're moving more and more services into the cloud that are currently hosted by ARIN. So I did a count a little bit earlier today, and we currently have 10 services that we are currently using relying on the cloud for our systems. And this goes from laptop backups all the way through things like doing management of laptops. And we're planning on doing 3 more, and we have 2 more that are under evaluation on whether or not they're going to be cost effective to be put into the cloud. We're going to be upgrading our PBX. You may have heard of an issue we had with our phone system being down. It's currently using very old technology, using a PRI, using the plain old telephone network for us to gain access, which is interesting because we have a converter that actually moves it to SIP internally. Then it actually is distributed to the various people who have extensions like the help desks, both RSD and FSD. And we've moved CentOS 6 boxes to CentOS 7. We're moving more and more technical debt by upgrading our software. We're updating our internal Windows software, making our billing application fully redundant, upgrading our our security video monitoring gear. So this is gear that we have to actually make sure that our office is secure in the evenings. If we get alarm, we can, at some sort of tamper alarm, we can actually check the video system to see if anyone's actually tried to enter the facility. So we can do that remotely. We're hardening our laptop support for zero-touch management, which is important in today's COVID environment. Upgrading our monitoring system so that we can support fully redundant sites in terms of where the monitoring head is. We're doing improvements on our high availability infrastructure, as well as a hardware refresh on older gear. Okay, next slide, please. So, and here goes to the bonus. In the next slide, please. These are slides I always like to show. And this is Whois and Whois-RWS, the amount of traffic that we see. And what's interesting about this is that we see just an amazing amount of traffic on our directory service infrastructure. And this is amazing in comparison to what the other regional registries see. And I think is because that we're essentially the legacy RIR, even though that we're the third in line in terms of its inception. ARIN actually came from the Internic, which actually came from SRINIC and so on from the way back when. And people default to our services to figure out where they need to go for their directory service question. So you can see here that we have quite a bit of traffic, 2,500 queries per second. It's gone down a little bit. It's been as high as 4,000 queries a second. Now it's currently sort of settled down to 2,500 queries per second, at least for now. Okay, and that's on port 43. Okay, next slide, please. And this is another interesting slide, and this is RDAP. And you can see by the blue line here that here's our traffic on V4. We're seeing about 150 queries per second. This is a comparison to other regional registries seeing about 30. We're seeing about 150 on V4. And actually, one of the things I find kind of interesting is that V6, we're starting to see a little bit of traffic. You can see that we're still on the low side, maybe between 5 and 10 queries per second, but you can see that we're finally seeing some traffic over V6. And that's mainly because RDAP's a fairly modern protocol, has a modern client that you can use. And if your host that uses that RDAP client actually supports V6, it will use V6. So anyways, next slide, please. That is the end of my presentation, and I think I'm 5 minutes over.
That's okay. We'll forgive you for that with all that information you had to cover. Reminder to everybody again to please make sure your name and affiliation are connected to your questions. Now is the time to get those questions in, as well as raise your hand if you'd like to speak. Currently, I've got a couple questions for you, Mark. Kevin Bloomberg from The Wire is curious why you're migrating to CentOS 7, which has an EOL of 3 years and is now considered very dated.
Yeah, CentOS 8 is something that we're not sure we want to go to at this point in time, because we like the idea of having sort of regular releases that are timed, and so we haven't moved to that yet. CentOS 7 is at least here for 3 years, and that gives us some opportunity to figure out what we want to do next. So good question, though. Very good question.
Thanks. And Gary Geeson from CentralLogic, also ARIN AC. We're planning on relying on free services like HIBP. Is ARIN contributing back to those services, either with financial assistance or technical assistance?
Sorry, can you re-ask that question again?
Sure. Planning on relying on free services like HIBP.
Okay.
And he wants to know whether ARIN is contributing back to those services.
Not at this point in time, but that's something I'm sure that we will consider. I think Mr. Kern may want to answer.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent point. We can, I don't know whether or not there's an option for contributing, but we'll go check. It's possible we might need someone to sponsor that contribution. What I mean by that is it may be that we need to double check. That'd be the type of thing that we could do as a grant, for example, periodically. It's not quite a purchase of service, so it wouldn't be a normal expense we just do. But if the community thought that the value of the service was high and it was something that ARIN should contribute to, that might be something that we could consider. I'll need to look at the various ways we can fund or contribute to that and see which one makes sense.
Thank you, John. So one of the things that we're doing within ARIN, which is actually fairly new, is that many of the tools that we're putting out actually we're putting out in the public domain as well, and which is fairly new for ARIN to do with Nick Info as well as the RDAP Bootstrap client. There's a number of other tools that are in our ARIN's GitHub repository that you're more than welcome to take a look at and use.
Thank you so much. Last chance if anyone has any further questions or would like to raise their hand and share or ask questions. Looks like our queues are clear right now. Thanks, Mark. I will turn it back over to Mr. Curran to introduce our next presentation.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Mark.